cover story. Today we are in conversation with Dr. Vikram Sampath. He's an historian and an author, and we've been reading his biography of Veer Savarkar. Especially, we really enjoyed that, Vikram, and other books also. But today we are here to congratulate you on your latest book, Waiting for Shiva: Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyan Vapi. In fact, this is a debate that is really very current and ongoing. And here you document the case for the temple over there, Vishwanath Temple, where you say that whether it's historical references, archaeological, legal, you made a very fine case in your book. I'll go into that later, but first, why did you choose this topic and how long did you take it?
Thank you, Priya, for inviting me to your show, and it's so good to finally be doing this in person and not over Zoom windows.
Too many Zoom calls.
Yes. I was neck deep into another project. I was writing the story of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, which was to come out later this year. But in the middle, Vishwanath intruded, and how. So by chance, I'd met Vishnu Shankar Jain, who he and his father have been fighting this case for a very long time. And in the course of a conversation, he mentioned to me that there's so much that is currently in the media. There's so much of discussions happening around Gyan Vapi in the case. As we speak, there are new developments. But I think common people really do not know what are the contours of the case. What's the history of this contestation and what is it that we are fighting for? So I initially thought it will just be a few articles or so on this. But later, the amount of material that I managed to discover was so staggering that I thought it's almost a historian's responsibility to ensure that this is brought, the records are illuminated, so that it comes out into public realm and one understands quite dispassionately what are the various sources, as you said, scriptural sources, archaeological evidences from the latest ASI report, traveler accounts right from Hyun Sang to Persian travelers to contemporary chronicles in over various periods of time, Sanskrit, nibandhas or long form compositions, legal papers, British colonial records, archival papers. So a conglomerate of all of this to trace the history of Kashi Vishwanath Temple and why it's always been so important and sacrosanct for the Hindu community. And the Hindus never gave up on that space. There was always constantly reclamation attempts. So to say this case now is not just something that's started now or happening now. It has a long history of its own, which is what has been documented in this book.
In fact, in your introduction, and at your book launch, which was, I was there for that book launch. It was an amazing launch, and the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman also, she spoke, and I've noticed you also written on the importance of documentation, which is really helping you now to make the case. Those who are making the case for the Vishwanath Temple.
Right.
There is a whole legal documents to back it. But in your introduction, you also talk about another reason why you wrote the book, which is you say that in India, the albatross of secularism really falls on the Hindu shoulders. So why are we being so apologetic about claiming or reclaiming what is originally ours? Is there a what do I say, narrative building here? Is there a you also not just making the case for Kashi Vishwanath, but the case for Hinduism also, a larger case?
True, because I think I really don't agree with this larger rule that just give us these three, Kashi, Mathura, Ayodhya, and then we will stop. Because I don't think anybody has the right to make those demands on behalf of the entire Hindu community. The larger question here is of retributive justice, and any sane, civilized modern democracy which runs by rule of law, if your property, if your real estate has been usurped by somebody, it should be very logical that through a peaceful and legal means, you actually reclaim it, which is what has happened in Kashi and which is bound to happen in several other places. Now in Ayodhya, it was a very difficult case because there was very little evidence and so on. People kept saying, show us the evidence, show us the evidence. Everything was demolished. Whereas in Kashi, you go there, you see the western walls, the ruins. It doesn't need an ASI survey to tell you that those are remnants of an ancient temple, which was built in the 16th century. The walls are all of Hindu architecture. But in addition to that, those what is visible to the naked eye, it has further been buttressed by an 800-page ASI survey report that has just come out, which lays bare every detail of the Vishwanath Mandir. The broken idols have been found in the debris there. The various modern technologies that have been used, GPR, ground penetrating radar and so on. You have an idea of all the substructures. There have been inscriptions right from the 12th century to the 17th century in various languages, not only Sanskrit and Nagari, but also Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada and South Indian languages, which goes to underscore the fact that was known that Kashi and the Vishwanath temple was very high on the pan-Indian consciousness over centuries. And so that is what this book attempts to do, which tries to put all these evidences together in a manner that, of course, it builds a case for the temple is one thing, but it also creates awareness, because a lot of Hindus themselves may ask, why do we need this? Where is the need to reclaim? These kind of questions we saw even during Ayodhya. Let's build a school, hospital, something there. So why is it such a sacred spot? Why its reclamation is so important to that civilizational awakening and identity that you mentioned? All of that is the large contour of this book.
In fact, taking off again, I want to also, Vikram, you write beautifully. I mean, I've always enjoyed, reading what you write for its information and also for the use of language. And there is an underlying emotion that comes across, which really strikes a chord. And in fact, when you talk about, for instance, to go on further, what you said, you've written that the concept of nation is not just the constitution defined in territorial or legal terms, but also emotional terms. So why do we want the, our mandir back is basic, the Kashi Vishwanath, is because there is an emotional connect also. Correct?
Totally, Priya. And I think, today this conflict between constitutional patriotism and civilizational, reverence, that's been the constant schism, I think. While I argue, even in the book and elsewhere, that our constitution draws from our civilizational ethos and not the other way around. Otherwise, in 1950, to have the constitution part 3, have the pictures of Sri Ram, Sita ji and Lakshman
in the constitution.
In the constitution.
Yes.
Today it would be called some Sanghi agenda and bigoted, campaign. Whereas our constitution makers also didn't think that was something different, because these were the exemplars of the civilization. There was something to look forward to as ideals of virtuosity. Today that assumes a totally different kind of a marker. So, I mean, as I said, reclamation, when Devi Ahilyabai Holkar in the 18th century goes around reconstructing temples across India, the length and breadth of India, not all the Char Dhams, the 7 Puris, and the 12 Jyotirlings. We know only Kashi and Somnath that she reconstructed, but she reconstructed several other temples. She united the north and south by bringing the water from the Ganga to the temples in South India up to Rameshwaram, so that there is that emotional connect among different people. And right from the 7th century, 8th century, when Adi Shankaracharya goes on his campaign all over India, Bharat Varsha then, there was no need for a young man from Kerala in a village who probably lived only 32, 35 years something, to actually establish cardinal mutts in the 4 locations that he did: South, Sringeri, Puri in the east, Dwarka in the west, and Badrinath in the north. And the Sarvagnya Peeth in Kashmir as the all-knowing center of knowledge. So somewhere he was circumscribing the sacred geography of this country and saying this is the civilizational expanse of this nation. And nobody stopped him saying, you're a Malayali, a Kerala person, so you're a foreigner, don't come into our territory. No one stopped him anywhere, right? So the very fact that there was this common emotional, connect to the civilization, that is what makes a nation. Now, political borders or laws can keep changing. In 1947, what the subcontinent was, it is not what it is today. Even within the country, 20 years ago, Andhra Pradesh, what it was today, it is not. There are 2 states, Andhra and Telangana now. So borders can be drawn on paper, but that doesn't change the emotional connect that brings among the people. And that is where the civilizational ethos is so important. And this is the debate, I think, that is the ideas of India that we also earlier had some discussions on. That is it a constitutional patriotism, that the constitution is a supreme thing, which it is, but that is not the only defining edifice of Indian nationhood. There is a civilizational background which far predates the constitution.
But which is what we hear very often, that what Prime Minister Modi, the legacy that he's leaving is a civilizational renaissance that he's ushering in, more than just this whole limited sense of Hindutva.
Right. And Priya, I think, the BJP or Mr. Modi may have been catalysts to several of these movements, but I think today to assume that this is all just a political movement, that this awakening we saw, or the overpouring of devotion across the country by common Indians, across the length and breadth of India during the Pran Pratishtha.
Did you go for that?
I stayed away because I didn't want to go in the crowds. I wanted to go at a later time, and now Ram Lalla has come back. He's going to stay there for 1,000 years.
So you have your time
is
for
there. So, but the fervor that was noticed all over India, common people, across geographies, doing pujas in their homes. People were lighting diyas outside there. It was another Diwali of sorts of Ram's return after his long exile of 500 years. To dub all of this as some Hindutva project or some bigoted agenda, I think it is just being in cuckoo land totally, because you're not seeing that there is a palpable shift in the mood of this nation. This is divorced from political agenda. Politicians may make benefit out of it, that's another issue. But common people who find that reverence, and like you mentioned, you can own up your identity without a sense of apologia, without a sense of feeling ashamed, as we were made to feel. Every other community in India can wear its identity on its sleeve proudly, but it was always the Hindu who was asked to tone down so that you don't become visible too much. And that was post-independent narrative, which is being contested hotly today, saying you're not the aggressor, you're not the person who is going to be a predator on anybody, but at the same time, don't make us not assert what is rightfully ours. And that is the shift in narrative that I'm seeing, at least as an outsider to all these political, movements that are happening.
Correct. No, but even when you talk about the claims, I don't know what to call it, rewriting of history, or the history as it was taught to us by the left liberals, by a certain view. For instance, Aurangzeb destroyed the temple because you're right, the Hindu Rajas were saying that there was one of the Ranis of Kutch was molested by the priests. But you said there is nothing to back it.
Yes.
I was there at your launch. Why don't you make that case? I found it pretty interesting.
Well, yes. So this story was spun, I think, by one of the very veteran Congress leaders who also went on to become, I think, the governor of Odisha, and he was a scholar and so on, Dr. Bishambar Nath Pandey. In one of his papers, Islamic Culture and India, he makes this claim that, Aurangzeb was going on an entourage to Bengal with all the Rajput kings and queens. And while they cross Varanasi, the Rajas seek his permission to stay back and perform puja. And he, being the very generous, secular, golden-hearted man, allows that according to this fairy tale. And then the Rajas, they themselves don't go, which is again a logical loophole. They send their queens to go and do the worship. And the third loophole, the Ranis go unarmed without any soldiers.
Yes,
and they apparently go there and worship and come back. And one of the Ranis is missing, and they realize that it's a Rani of Kutch. And then he's very enraged, sends his soldiers to find where she is. And when they go there, there's a sliding wall. I don't know how that is. There's a sliding wall which leads to a flight of stairs to a cellar. And that is where this Rani is supposed to be sitting, wailing. All her clothes are gone. Her ornaments are gone. And when they ask her the reason, she says, the evil Brahmin priests, they molested me. And this is something they routinely do with all wealthy pilgrims who come there. And so then the Rajas were so enraged that they forced Aurangzeb to go and demolish the mosque. This is a site of Satan and so on. So much of evil doing is happening. I don't know which Rani was molested in Mathura, in Somnath, and the other thousands of temples that Aurangzeb demolished. But this story was then attributed to Pattabhi Sitaramayya's book, Feather, Stone and Flowers, in which he quotes this. And it's horrifying to see what he writes there. He says, I've heard of this story from a mullah in Lucknow who has a very rare manuscript in which this is mentioned. And the mullah was supposed to give it to one of Sitaramayya's friend. Either the friend or the mullah, one of them died. And so the manuscript did not come to him. But this is a widespread story which I have heard. So it's an unknown mullah, an unnamed friend, and a completely unknown so-called rare manuscript. You don't even have the name of that manuscript. You don't even know when which year this episode happened. No sources. Just some story I heard, you told me some story, she told me some story. Based on this, I make a theory. And then that lie gets perpetuated 100 times by all the, the word salad of various academicians. And then it starts gaining a veneer of truth. In the book, I quote several Marxist historians like Gargi Chakravarti and K.N. Panikkar and others who buttress this with further word salad and sophistry of
But
language.
it's everyone quoting everyone in the same bubble.
Yeah, it's a circular referencing mafia. So, you create that thing. One person has to plant the seed of a lie, and then so many others will keep quoting that in peer-reviewed journals, which are made so much of. And so that's how this lie was perpetuated. And so many people, 3-4 PhDs quote this story. Whereas in Masire Alamgiri, the contemporary account of Aurangzeb, there is clear reference that he gave a farman in April 1669 that all these evil centers of the Brahmins in Thatta, Multan, Banaras should be totally destroyed. Not only temples, but also gurukuls and places of learning. And in compliance with the orders, the soldiers send him back a message in September 1669 saying, we have demolished all the temples, including the temple of Bishnath. It is clearly mentioned in Masire Alamgiri. But Masire Alamgiri is said to be, it's not an authentic source. But this unnamed mullah and his unknown manuscript, that can be believed and perpetuated as a lie just by the weight of the power that you wielded in the past, being close to the proximity to power and so on. So I think this lie too, which we saw even in the Ayodhya case, the manner in which the Marxist historians lied in court, gave testimonies full of so many loopholes, that is also, I think it lies in smithereens today, the reputations as well as their credibility.
But you say that the Muslims were ready to actually come, may have even agreed to a compromise on the Babri Masjid issue, but they were buttressed by these other claims by saying, no, we'll help you prove your case.
Correct, and this is not something I say, but Mr. K.K. Mohammed, who was leading the whole survey of the ASI as the head of the North Division, he mentions in his autobiography, Nyan Oru Bharatiyan in Malayalam, Me Indian, he says the same thing, that the Muslim side was very conciliatory, saying, routinely in Muslim countries, mosques get shifted or translocated for silliest of reasons, that we want to build a railway line or widen a road. So the people here also there are sane people everywhere. Yeah. So they say, this is so sacred to the other side. This really doesn't mean so much to us. So let's give it up. We'll get another place somewhere else. And this is just a congregational place of worship, a mosque. So it can be done anywhere. Whereas a pran pratisthit murti in a temple is a different structure. But then these leftist historians kept telling them, no, we'll build a strong case for you. You continue to fight. And then what was the outcome? Dr. Meenakshi Jain, in her book Battle for Rama, she clearly documents all those testimonies. It's hilarious. You either get angry or it's hilarious, the lies that even people of the stature of Irfan Habib on the Vishnu Hari inscription of the temple. All sorts of claims made that this inscription fell from the Babri structure on 6th December, and these historians kept saying that this was planted inscription, whereas that inscription clearly said this is a temple of Dashrath Putra who killed Dashanan and all of that, built in whatever century, all those details. So that was sought to be discredited, saying this was a planted inscription, it was stolen from the Lucknow Museum. The courts repeatedly asked, where was this, what was this? There were no answers. And so many historians who gave testimonies in court, the bigwigs never came to the court. They send their, subordinates. It's hilarious. We don't know any Arabic or Persian. We are not an expert on Mughal history. These kind of things. All our sources are from Times of India reports. Whereas the VHP was showing archaeological evidence, was showing textual evidence and scriptural evidence. They're saying we depend on Times of India and other newspaper reports. So those lies too, I think somewhere have been...
The importance of documentation as you talk about. I'm going to take a break and come back and talk a bit about the emotional significance of the Kashi Vishwanath temple and how that, the whole shivling has been, some people have made it an object of ridicule or misunderstood. The misconceptions behind that is something you've talked about in your book, and I'd like you to tell our viewers after a break. Hello and welcome back to Cover Story. We are in conversation with Dr. Vikram Sampath and also about his latest book, which is Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth about Kashi's Gyan Vapi mosque. In fact, it's a brilliant book, but you've also, apart from the legal case, you've talked about the emotional connect and, just talk about the shivling and how it's not just a phallus symbol, as some people say that, why are you worshipping the phallus? There is a whole lot of emotional connect.
Correct.
And what it stands for.
That was very important because in the course of the research of the book, I was very fortunate to get the guidance and support of the Jagadguru Shankaracharya, Sri Abhinav Shankar Bharti of the Kudli Sringeri Samsthan. And he brought this point up that I think, though this is outside the scope of the book or my work as a historian, I'm not a philosopher and so, but he gave me a lot of guidance as to explain what a shivling.
If I'm reading what I'm fighting for the this thing, you should also know the
what is
emotional
it
connect.
Yeah, exactly. So the phallus worship, or it's a male organ, that's a very blinkered and a very puerile way of looking at things. Ling itself, the word ling in Sanskrit means a signifier. It's a marker or a signifier of something. Okay. In South India, you have names like Ram Lingam. So it doesn't mean it's Rama's organ or something. It's just, it means he signifies or symbolizes Ram. So similarly, shivling is it's an object which is a signifier of Shiva. Similarly, there are so many other, in context, I put it in the book too, in the Mahabharata, in the Manusmriti, in various texts, one word can have multiple meanings when it comes to Sanskrit. But if we depend on Western translations or Western or even Indian translations of people who don't understand Sanskrit, you will take a very narrow and blinkered view of what a particular word is. So, and Western accounts talk of shivling also as a symbol of fertility. And people go there to get children. Now, which of us who have gone and poured, Jalabhishek and milk abhishek on a shivling, do we have that going on in our mind that this is for fertility or this is for... We're not looking at it as a reproductive organ that we are going and worshipping. But that's how the Western commentators write about it. So I think it was very important to debunk that, because even when that shivling came up in the Wazukhana during the Advocate Commissioner survey in 2022, which the other side kept saying it's a fountain. Even then, there were lots of derisive tweets and other comments that, this is phallus worship, you people worship anything that throws up and so on. So it was very essential to also underscore in this book as to why the shivling is important and what is its esoteric meaning.
So in this, battle of narratives, I've noticed there is a lot of demonizing of Nehru. Is that also, do you think, is it, should you target the left liberals? Should you target an individual, or do you write your own book with your own, sources and make a case?
I don't know who does it, but at least I don't intend to demonize anybody. But then this entire project post-independence of this apologetic way of looking at your own past, particularly of your Hindu past, was courtesy Mr. Nehru. And, he had a certain worldview of what India should become, and also his view of what the Indian past, how it needs to be written and documented, which he made a blueprint through the discovery of India. And all the historians of the time, they understood that this is the ruler's diktat and we'll have to follow the same, template. So invariably, when you're contesting that, the progenitor of that idea also needs to be debunked. And none of, at least my books, whether it was on Savarkar or this or Bravehearts, it's not a point-by-point rebuttal of someone else who's written something else. It is laying out facts on your own merit. In the process of that, obviously, pre-established facts or pre-established status quo views, they will get challenged. And in the process, people who made those claims will also get exposed and somewhere demonized, if you want to use that term, not necessarily intentionally, but the fact that they made this subterfuge, this Pandey story or the Sitaramaya story that I told you, if I'm mentioning that, obviously in the process of that, those people come out not shy, smelling of roses, that they had an agenda, very insidious agenda, and to perpetuate that, which they did, and that gets exposed. You can call that demonization, but it's also throwing the torchlight on insidious agendas that have been running in this country since independence, uncontested, unchallenged. Even all these lies for the Ayodhya case that I mentioned, not one of them has paid a price for making so many false claims on oath in courts. The courts also have unfortunately let them go, and these people still continue to be celebrated as eminent historians, as Arun Shourie had already exposed several of them in his book by the same name.
Correct. So you also, I think you're also capturing the where you say for Nehru the past is, I think, belongs fossilized in a museum,
Yeah.
while it is actually a living tradition,
Yes.
which is what has to be
Yes.
celebrated and.
Yeah, because one chapter is on independent India and what happened then. It starts with the reclamation of Somnath, and that is
Where Nehru
something.
didn't go, huh?
Yeah, where Nehru not only did not go, but he tried to prevail on Dr.
The
Rajendra
president.
Prasad, the president, not to go. Told K.M. Munshi also, and the Jam Sahab of Gujarat, who was the governor, and also the head of the Mandir trust, that don't do this. This is Hindu revivalism. I'm very scared of that. I'm very uncomfortable. And what will be? What
Could
will
be
the
just
West think of?
separation of church and state.
If that was his reason, then there was no business of his government and successive governments controlling Hindu temples.
That is also
On the one hand, you control Hindu temples. Every other community in this country can run their own temples
Except
and
Hindu.
education institutions. You control Hindu temples, but even 0.01% of the revenue that you're taking away from all the, the donations of devotees, you don't want to plow back into the temple. In Tamil Nadu, even to this day, there are temples where even money to do daily pujas is not there. They are going under disrepair. The pujaris are getting some 100 rupees a month or 50 rupees a month and living in utter poverty. So what sort of separation of church and state is that? And on the other hand, you have the Waqf board, which is the third largest occupier of land in this country, after the defense and the railways in India. 75% of Delhi where we sit is on Waqf property. The Delhi High Court is on Waqf land.
Seriously.
The Central Vista is on Waqf land. Well, even Mukesh Ambani's house is supposed to be on Waqf land. So you don't know what is Waqf land. Suddenly something will emerge. And see, the anomaly is there that you have the Waqf Act of 1995, which Narasimha Rao's government brought, where if I say that your house is on Waqf land, I give you a notice. In 30 days, you have to respond. Now, you can't contest that in a civil court in India. There's only a Waqf tribunal where you can go and so you're the jury, prosecutor, judge, everything is the Waqf itself. So when these unequal laws are there in this so-called Hindu Rashtra theocracy of ours today, what is secularism then? It begs a lot to be defined. So I think this Nehruvian model of constantly, as I said, tone down the Hindu identity, but mollycoddle everybody else, particularly the largest minority, and think that that is some great prescription for national unity. I think that is also seriously contested today because it hasn't stood the test of time.
Fair enough, and you make a good case. We are out of time, but I just want to ask you, as you say, in a Hindu religion, there's no one God, there's no one text, so who is your Isht Devta,
My Isht Devta is the Devi, actually.
Devi, actually.
So, I think that's again something so unique to our culture, where we are the only civilization which has a divine surviving civilization which has a divine feminine. I mean, whether it's Islam or Christianity or any other religions, the Indic faiths, Buddhism has Tara and all these. So it's the Indic faiths which actually worship the divine feminine. The Greek and Romans of that time did. But our goddesses or gods are not these angry, jealous creatures sitting somewhere, saying, are you worshipping me? If you're not, you're going to roast in hellfire. There's no such thing. They coexist with us as friends, as, your lovers in some cases, like Mirabai thought of Krishna as. And you can write eulogies to them. You can also chide them, as the Bhakti poets wrote Ninda Stuti also. There's no concept of blasphemy. There's no concept of heresy, where if you say something, your head will be decapitated. You can say anything about your gods. So that largely, pluralistic, accepting view of the gods is so unique to the Hindu faith. And so, and in this case, interestingly, Priya, there were two civil suits, right? 1991 and 2021. The 91 thing stuck for 22 years because it was filed in the name of Vishweshwar himself as the plaintiff. The 2021, which Harishankar Jain and Vishnu Shankar Jain filed, that was in the name of Shringar Gauri. And Hariji, in jest told me that Shivji is a, samadhi mein leen hai, he doesn't care his temple is there or not, but Devi Ma will not agree that, my husband's place is occupied. So the minute the case was filed in her name, things galloped so fast.
Ah.
I mean, she had jumped into Daksha's, Havan to when her husband was insulted. So how would she allow the temple to be occupied this way? Was his thing in jest, of course. That's when the Advocate Commissioner survey, the ASI survey, and as a result of this, even the 91 suit was fast tracked. In December 2023, the court said that within 6 months, that needs to be disposed of, which means by June 2024, that 91 suit also, which languished in courts for 22, 23 years, is also going to be settled. So I think it's my Ishta Devi who is actually ensuring that this case for her husband moves faster than what it was.
And I think your book is also going to be helping the cause. So keep fighting the good fight, Vikram. And thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Thank you, Priya. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.